good evening here in London. It looks like it's not very evening, and there's a lot of light in Buenos Aires. And it's also getting close to winter, and it's the beginning of summer. So we live on the same planet, but completely different environment, but we have the same problems to resolve. And thank you very much, Mr. Minister, agreeing to be a part of our conference. I hope that next time you will be able to travel to our conference, be that in Singapore or elsewhere, because the issues that we want to discuss with you as well are very, very important for everybody, be that in the north or south, be that in summer or winter. But thank you again, Minister.
Thank you very much, President Sarkissian. It's a great pleasure, and congratulations for the excellent work you are doing. I'm sure this is going to be a greatly enriching conference for understanding some of the key challenges we face today in the international arena.
Well, thank you very much. And let's go ahead. I think my first question would be connected with the fact that the world is, in many ways, on a larger scale, is run by geopolitics. Decisions are made by heads of states, and specifically the ones that are heads of states of big states. And that creates a regional politics, a bigger politics, and the local politics, but also geopolitics. And it looks like sometimes that geopolitics is about international relations, about diplomacy, about conflicts, about wars, but less about health, well-being, longevity, lives of people. So I would like to ask you a general question about where is the connection because geopolitics and political decision-making and health?
Well, certainly domestic policy decisions are largely related to international frameworks, and international situations are shaped by dynamics of power, meaning geopolitics. So there's a clear connection between the evolution of geopolitics and well-being, and of course, as part of that, health issues across the different countries of the world. Let me note a couple of points that illustrate this connection and that we are going through right now. The first one has to do with how economic policies, particularly in advanced economies, react to the evolution of geopolitics. So over the last 4 years, the two largest shocks that we face in the global economy were COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine. What we're seeing now as a response to this sequence of shocks that led to inflationary pressures all over the world. Inflation became the top concern, not just for central bankers, but also for finance ministers of the G20. The response has been tightening monetary policies, increases in the interest rates, and what we economists call quantitative tightening, meaning that the liquidity that had been created after the fall of Lehman Brothers in 2008 is being reduced now through the action of central banks. That a policy stance that looks quite abstract and related to financial issues has serious consequences for well-being and health in other countries. What we're seeing now, particularly in the Southern Hemisphere, including in my continent, in South America, is that refinancing debts becomes more difficult for the governments in the world, because the lack of liquidity means more expensive liquidity, and particularly more in a context in which the Federal Reserve in the US increases the interest rates. So when countries can not refinance the debts, they face tougher options, tougher trade-offs. And what we see in an increasing number of countries is cuts to critical spendings, including health. So that has adverse consequences for the well-being of millions, I would say hundreds of millions of people in the Southern Hemisphere. So you see how the geopolitical situation through different channels affects the well-being of societies across the world. If I may, a second point that is related to this is what happens with the adherence or rejection to the international rules for trade in the context of the geopolitical evolution. When in 2020 I was finance minister of Argentina, I was running the economy in the context of COVID-19. Many governments at the time were asking for a suspension of the trade-related investment provisions, the TRIPS, of the World Trade Organization, to have a more rapid and larger availability of the COVID-19 vaccines. And there was opposition, mainly from European countries, to get a suspension of the TRIPS of the WTO. And that had serious consequences for the speed at which the societies could get the vaccines and therefore get immunized, affecting well-being, not just directly through the health consequences, but also through the economic consequences that the pandemic created. Now, we see a different situation in how the enforcement of the World Trade Organization rules occurs in a context in which, as a response to a geopolitical context marked by more instability and conflicts, Europe and the US want to adopt large-scale industrial policies to be more resilient. As for instance, to what could happen to a breakage in the supply value of chips, of the supply chain of chips. And we see now that there is no respect for the same rules that have been imposed on other countries in a different geopolitical context. So President Sarkissian, every policymaker that is running an economy would say there is a clear connection between geopolitics and well-being, and these are issues that need to be carefully studied, and we have to pay more attention to them.
Well, thank you very much for your answer. That also makes me think that we should continue together to explore a little bit something else. Because in every and each country, worldwide, there is an understanding that health and medical support, healthcare and everything are the key factors or key areas of activity of every specific government. But also the governments, when you think about their activity, are very much involved in issues related to general security, be that military security of their own state and nation, be that security related to migrants, security or security connected with food security. In many countries, it's water security. But do we hear a lot about health security? Because the approaches are two different things. Healthcare is the care when basically in a majority of the cases, we are asked to people to go to doctors when they already are ill. There's no prevention or early discovery of that, of course. But there's something which are probably, even I can call it health security, when money is spent to do more and more research in biotechnology, in biology, or in medical, because I do believe that we are on a crossroad of great discoveries that will happen in biotechnology and biological sciences, especially with the help of artificial intelligence, that can help us to start thinking about health security, basically preventing us getting ill before rushing to cure our illnesses. What do you think about this?
President, before being in government, I spent years in academia, and I still do, on the economic theory front. And what I can tell you is that over the last 40, 45, 50 years, the way economic theory evolved was on the basis of theorems that state that under certain conditions, the market economy would produce the most efficient outcomes that can be achieved. And one missing aspect of this line of economic theory that has been the mainstream is the issue of resilience. It was completely missing from the evolution of economics, and that has had consequences for policy making. So the pandemic put us in a situation in which we found out that we were acting in a state of myopia. We didn't know how interconnected the global value chain was, and we were learning how interconnected it was while we were seeing that lockdowns led to disruptions in that global value chain. And the system was not prepared for such a shock. Basically, there had been no preparedness, no health preparedness, no preparedness in any serious sense. So we face a system that lacked resilience. We have learned from that, or I hope we have. But a key discussion today is a discussion of policies for resilience, not only in terms of national security, but also in terms of health. Preparedness, the need for preparedness is a key theme now in the agendas of the G20, in the agendas of the G7. And policies, public policies, also at the domestic level, should reflect the basic premise that systems have interconnections, and we need to prepare them. We need to make them more resilient to large shocks.
Yeah, I think the experience of many countries connected with the pandemic, although a lot of them were talking and asking international community for help to get vaccines, but post-pandemic facts are showing that most of the vaccines, or a lot of vaccines that were eventually delivered, they didn't reach the final user. So I think the system is connected, as you were saying, with several factors. One of the factors is the existing international barriers or difficulties of communications, and the second one is, even if the vaccine is reaching a country, has the country a system internally to be resilient, and at the end of the day, deliver the very last piece or the very last vaccine to the person who is living at the far end of his country. So that's also a very important issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are spillovers across countries. I think the COVID-19 pandemic could have been better managed if the international community had been better prepared for dealing with not just the pandemic, which is a very rare event, but any international major shock that is associated with large spillovers. Until we don't see immunization in every part of the world, given how interconnected the world is, that has consequences for the other countries as well. So the distributional dimension of dealing with both preparedness, meaning ex ante, and the response to shocks is also very important for having societies that perform better.
Well, I think this is a theme that you and I can go forever talking, because it's exciting. It's about ourselves, our health, but it's also about the future of our children and next generations. It's clear that we're living a very special time in history of mankind, because we have come since the technological revolutions happening one after another, we have come to a place where many things are moving with a huge space, be that technological advancements, appliances, communications. That also has huge effect on the change of the structure and the way society is run. But I have a feeling that despite the fact that it looks like we are a 21st century when we speak with a telephone or send a satellite to Mars or Venice or to Moon, in our healthcare systems, We are still living probably sort of in 20th century, or maybe in some places in 19th century. So a lot must be done, because there is a huge challenge ahead. And it's not clear what is that we have to be afraid more: artificial intelligence, or the new virus, or the new bacteria that our antibiotics will not work against them.
There's a lot to be done. I think one of the key messages from this discussion is that while today we see a revival of industrial policies that are key for the transformations that the world needs, including climate and including resilience, we need to make sure that the international community designs rules that don't create unlevel playing fields. Because if that's the case, there will be countries that will lag behind, will have more serious problems of well-being, and that is going to affect global political instability. I mean, through different channels like migration and health. And the other issue is that within economies, I mean, at the domestic level, distribution is a key aspect of the economic policy.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. It was a pleasure to speak to you. And I hope that in the future, we'll have the chance of having you personally present at the conference and continue our discussions on this utmost important subject, which is life on this planet.
Thank you, President. And I very much look forward to being in person in the next summit.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.